Stothart, Philip Rebnock, and Indy Gopinathan from IAMGOLD. And then also welcome everybody who's joined to the broadcast. We have an audience that's in primarily in Asia. So I see here logged in from people from Singapore, Australia, Tokyo, mainland China, Hong Kong, and then a few Canadians and and North American based people. So welcome all of you, and it's great to have you. IAMGOLD is a company that we have been following for many years, and traditionally Gord would take time to come to Asia, but given that it's with the difficulties of traveling, we've been trying to do these webinars regularly. I know a lot of you are shareholders of the company and have been following the story, and for some of you, this may be the first time encountering the IAMGOLD presentation. So thank you and for taking the time and welcome. And what I would like to do is, Gord, if you might be kind enough to maybe introduce yourself for those of you who haven't met you before. And then after that, what I thought we could do is have you do the presentation, and then we can do questions afterwards. So with that, Gord, great to have you, and I'll pass the microphone to you.
Well, thanks very, very much, Jorge. It's good to reacquaint ourselves with this sector of the business. And as way of quick introduction, my name's Gord Stothart. I'm the president and CEO of IAMGOLD. I took on the current role in March of 2020, which was a pretty auspicious time to be changing jobs. And sort of 2 weeks into the new role is when the pandemic really hit Canada in a big way. And I've basically, for the most part, been based out of my house since then. Certainly in Canada and in Ontario in particular, we've been pretty heavily shut down. So those of you who've met me before may notice my hair is a little longer than it normally is because I haven't been able to get to a barber, but hopefully I'm going to change that this week. So I'm a mining engineer, mining and mineral processing engineer by training. I took my university in Vancouver at University of British Columbia. I worked for 20 plus years in the Noranda, becoming Falconbridge, becoming Xstrata organization. I worked both open pit mines and underground mines, base metal mines, primarily in Canada for the start. I did spend some time with business development in Toronto. And then in the early 2000s, actually in 1999, had the opportunity to get involved with the Antamina copper mine in Peru during the construction and startup, both on the construction and the operating side. Spent about 4 years in Peru and then spent the following 5 years in Chile, looking after first a SXEW heap leach operation, copper heap leach operation, and then with the project development team in Santiago for a couple of years before joining IAMGOLD in late 2007 as COO. And I stayed in that COO role up until taking the CEO role last year. Very pleased to meet you. Welcome to those of you I've met before, and welcome as well to those of you that are new to the story. I'm gonna, because we have a bit of a mixed crowd, I'm gonna move sort of through the high level parts of the presentation and get into a little specifics and really focus, I think, on the specifics that are key to the valuation of IAMGOLD these days. So I've got my colleague Phil Rabenak helping with the presentation. At a high level, as we're looking at ourselves right now, and it's taken a few years for us to get to this point, but we are really, I think, a little bit differentiated from a number of other mining companies, and we'll get into some statistics on that a little later. But we really are positioned in the company right now to grow. We are based in 3 main jurisdictions, and we have been in all those jurisdictions for 30 plus years. That includes West Africa, where IAMGOLD was founded in the early 1990s. Following the merger with Cambior in 2006, we acquired assets in the Guyana Shield in the northern part of South America and in Canada, and we remain in those jurisdictions. 3 operating mines, 1 in each jurisdiction, and a major construction project, the Côté project in Ontario and Canada, that's in construction now, to be followed by the Boto project at some point down the road, well-advanced project located in Senegal and in West Africa. We really do believe in the portfolio impact of being in a couple of different jurisdictions. You can see from the charts on the right-hand side of this slide that we really do look to have a balanced portfolio across those jurisdictions. We don't wish to have too many eggs in one basket. We do like these areas for their geologic prospectivity, and certainly South America and West Africa, I feel there's a lot more gold to be found in those areas, but they are somewhat challenging from a geopolitical standpoint. So having assets as well based in North America, I think provides us with that really good balance. So beyond the diversified operating portfolio, as is becoming more and more important in the investment community, and certainly in certain parts of the world, even more so, a lot of focus these days on what's now called ESG. It's been called a lot of things over time, but it really for us is around accountable mining. We've had our zero harm vision in place for nearly 15 years now, and it's been a guiding principle for how we operate around the world, really looking to provide strong support for the communities where we operate, the governments where we operate, and really treat the environment and health and safety, the safety and security of our workforce in super high regard. And that's served us well to manage through the COVID pandemic. We do have a really interesting growth story. This year, we've guided 630 to 700,000 ounces of production. But as we build Côté and then eventually add in Boto, we're going to move well over a million ounces per year by 2024. And at the same time, we'll be driving down our consolidated all-in sustaining costs into the second quartile as those new operations come in at very attractive margins and good cash flow metrics. We have maintained a conservative financial position. We have always had the vision that when you enter into a major project like a Côté, you need to understand where the financing and have that financing in place before you start it so that you can see it through to the end without getting into a pinch. And even beyond the growth projects at Côté and Boto, we really do have reserve and resources that provide us with a really interesting pipeline. So for us, it's not just getting over 1 million ounces, but it's filling that pipeline and finding a way to sustain those numbers into the future. We feel there's a bit of a sweet spot in that 1 to 2 million ounce range, big enough to be relevant for the market, but not so big and not such an onerous treadmill that replacing that depletion on an annual basis is too much. Next. So the current operating mines, we have the Essakane mine in Burkina Faso, opened in 2010. The government of Burkina Faso has a 10% ownership, and we hold the remaining 90%. Essakane is our biggest cash flowing operation, and it's our largest producer. I've been producing roughly 400,000 ounces on a 100% basis for several years, and we'll continue to do so through at least 2026, which is the life of the current configuration of the CIL. We do have a tail of some additional years at a lower rate of production with heap leach towards the second half of this decade, but we are aggressively exploring in and around Essakane and looking for opportunities to extend the current production levels, hopefully to 2030 before we take that next move. Our longest running operation is the Rosebel mine in Suriname in South America. Came into production in 2004. At Rosebel, we hold a 95% ownership with the government of Suriname holding a 5% share on the main asset. And then there's a satellite asset called Saramacca, where Rosebel holds a 70% share, and the government-owned state oil company called Stothart holds the 30% share of that satellite asset. And Stothart is a very comfortable partner for us. They're the same company that holds the 25% share of the government's interest in Newmont's Miriam mine, also in Suriname. So they're experienced in dealing with gold mines and well financed and well run. Rosebel this year is producing in the low 200,000 ounce range. Historically, it has produced above that. And as we look at the 5-year plan going forward, we are expecting an increase in production at Rosebel, primarily because of the addition of the Saramacca satellite deposit, which really came into production last year and moving forward. Rosebel did have a challenging first quarter, partially due to COVID, partially due to weather. And as we're looking at Rosebel, we are anticipating a much stronger second half of the year at Rosebel. The last operating mine, our smallest mine and the smallest piece, if you will, of the business model is the Westwood mine in the province of Quebec in Canada. Westwood's a high-grade narrow vein underground mine. And this year we've guided 45 to 65,000 ounces. Unfortunately, Westwood had a significant seismic incident last year, which led us to put the underground operation into suspension in November last year. However, we announced about 6 weeks ago that we were reopening the underground, and that process is going well. And we are comfortable with the guidance numbers as the underground starts to come into production shortly. In the longer term, we are looking to grow that production at Westwood, both through the underground and through some regional plays. Production for the first quarter was similar to how we had performed in the middle of last year. As I said, Rosebel, I think, was the most impacted to the negative side in Q1. We were understaffed somewhat through Q1 as we were in the process of adding camp capacity to address physical distancing, if you will, of the workforce in camp, which motivated us to add around 300 additional camp rooms. That exercise is underway, and we are getting back to full manpower. That being said, Suriname is currently in a bit of another wave of COVID, and we are working with the government there in managing that situation and in encouraging the vaccination of the residents of Suriname and of our workforce. On an operating cost basis, in Q1, our all-in sustaining costs were a little over $1,200, in the range of our guidance, higher than we've seen for a while, really on the back of that lower production at Rosebel and some of the other increased costs. But as we move forward in time and as we move into the second half, we are hoping to see some improvement in the margins. And as we move into 2022 and beyond, we will see growth at both Westwood and Rosebel, with Essakane remaining fairly steady. Speak a little bit on ESG. I did mention our zero harm vision in place since 2007. We really have been received some recognition from third parties. We are ranked compared to other mining companies quite well in terms of our ESG performance. We are members of both the World Gold Council and the Mining Association of Canada, and we adhere to the Responsible Gold Mining Principles and the Towards Sustainable Mining, or TSM framework from Mining Association of Canada. Both very comprehensive operating standards that we've been involved with. The World Gold Council is more recent because they just developed the standards, but the Mining Association of Canada, those standards have been in place now for nearly 20 years. They continue to evolve, and we think it's an excellent framework for us to manage our environmental and social aspects of our business. And we have been recognized by the Mining Association Canada for our performance. On the social side, we have a couple of key projects that we find important to us. The Rosebel Community Fund in Suriname is a way for us to help develop the local communities. We have spent a lot of effort on support for local communities during the COVID issue, and that includes helping the public health authorities, helping with testing, helping with medical equipment and supplies, and now moving into helping with vaccinations. Another program that we're extremely proud of is the Triangle d'eau project, or water triangle project in and around at the Essakane mine. We completed the phase 1 of that project last year, which was a way to it actually result was bringing potable water to 60,000 people in and around the Essakane mine. We are in the process right now of gaining some partners and funding with the government of Canada and some other partners for phase 2, with the goal of advancing that potable water supply to an additional 75,000 people in and around the mine. So very strong. Our zero harm vision obviously goes well beyond our international operations and has really helped us in dealing as we advance the Côté mine in establishing a strong relationship with the First Nations on whose lands, traditional lands, Côté is found. And we have a strong partnership with Matagami First Nation and Flying Post First Nation in Northern Ontario, and very, very recently signed an agreement as well with the Métis Nation of Ontario. So we're very, very proud of our performance in communities. So looking at IAMGOLD, where we're situated now, and I know if as you mentioned, Jorge, there are a number of shareholders online. We are valued towards the lower end of the peer group on a number of different metrics. Our evaluation of that situation is really is in a large part related to where we are with the Côté project right now. Historically, for gold miners, when you enter into the construction period on a large project, you're put a little bit in the penalty box, if you will, as the market, in some senses, adopts a wait and see as to how the project rolls out. As we get closer to production at Côté, and then as we continue to add on Boto, looking at a lot of the valuation algorithms, our expectation is we're going to see a very strong rebound within that peer group and move ourselves more towards the median and hopefully a little bit better. Really focus the company right now on effective execution of Côté and on reliable production out of the existing mines. So sort of speaks to it. We have increased cash flows from the existing mines to generate that mine site free cash flow while we're in the build phase. Obviously the increased gold prices helped, but we're also doing some work on growing production, as I mentioned earlier, at Rosebel and Westwood. We've instituted some cost saving programs. We're going to start first with Essakane and Rosebel. We really do want to find ways to make sure that those operations, as they enter into the later part of their lives, can continue to generate strong cash flows. I will say that for the existing operations, especially Essakane and Rosebel, we have been using very conservative price assumptions in determining our reserves. We've been using a $1,200 gold price at our operations to determine reserves. As these operations head towards the sort of the last phase of their operations, we will be reviewing it. We in the short term want to make sure that we're generating cash flow, but in the medium term, as we head more towards the end of life of these operations, we want to make sure that we maximize the value out of them. And so we will continue to evaluate, once Côté is up and running, what the opportunities might be for additional production out of the existing packages. In the middle, obviously, Côté and then Boto, and I'll speak a little bit more about them in a little while. And then in the longer term, we do have a number of pipeline projects that we continue to advance, given the length of time it takes to bring things on these days. And I'll speak about a couple of them in a few secs. So as we look at our growth profile versus the peer group, you can see a very strong movement there. And as that growth really starts to come into focus, as we continue to execute on Côté and get near to production there, and at some point also bring in Boto, we do feel that that strong growth is going to be well rewarded in the marketplace, and is going to go a long ways towards repositioning the company within the peer group. And importantly for me, will strongly change our margins and our cost profile, which is really where long-term sustainability of any mining company comes from, is from having a good cost structure. Slide on Côté. So Côté is run in a joint venture between ourselves and Sumitomo Metal Mining out of Japan. We have a 70% share of that JV, and SMM controls the 30% share. And together the JV controls 92.5% of the overall project, with a third party holding a 7.5% sort of mixed ownership. We are in a great jurisdiction. We're about halfway between the towns of Timmins and Sudbury, just off the main highway between those two important mining cities in northern Ontario, very close to infrastructure. On the left-hand side of the slide at the bottom, you can see a couple photos from the project that's underway there. We announced last July. You can see the construction camp, and the taller buildings being the permanent camp just being erected up at Côté. And in the other picture there shows our first blast, which we took about 5 or 6 weeks ago. That's the first blast in the pit. I had an opportunity to visit the site 2 weeks ago. It is progressing very well, and we're excited about it. We are ahead of schedule with respect to our earlier milestones, and continue to work on advancing our other milestones. A few metrics on Côté: very long life, attractive production levels, and attractive costs. Obviously a very important asset for us, and one that has a lot of potential to do even more. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit later when I get to talk about Gosselin. So this slide really sort of speaks to The construction schedule we announced last July. As of the end of Q1, we're 18% total project complete. Detail engineering is very, very well advanced, well over 80% of detail engineering complete, and starting to get into the commitment curve well. Côté has evolved, or is in the process of evolving on a little different trajectory, if you will, than a lot of construction projects. We had quite a period of time between when the feasibility study was issued and when we actually announced construction, and we spent that time de-risking the project, really advancing the detail engineering such that when we announced construction, we were already over 60% of detail engineering complete, which has really meant that we've been able to advance the project fairly quickly. You can see our first major milestone, the start of earthworks, was about 4 or 5 months ahead of schedule. The site is working very aggressively to advance that next milestone, which is enclosing the process building. We'd really like to see that happen before the snow flies, and I'm feeling better every time I go up that's going to be achievable. Currently, we're still maintaining a conservative stance with respect to when we're going to start production in the second half of 2023. But as we continue to work through the project, we will look at opportunities to improve that first production date. In terms of costs, our guidance when we announced the go forward in last July, the IAMGOLD share is 875 to 925 million. We are looking at that now. There have been some pressures with respect to inflation in steel and copper and construction lumber and wages. Because of the fact we've been able to advance a lot of the project, I expect that we will see a reasonably good adherence to the budget as we've laid it out. But there are some pressures out there, and I don't want to sugarcoat them. As well, we have spent a lot of attention looking at the Canadian-US exchange rate. Obviously, we report in US dollars, but Côté, for 85% of the costs of Côté are really Canadian dollar driven. When we did our work last year, we had assumed a $1.30 exchange rate. We have been able for 2021 and a little bit less in 22 and 23, put some hedges in place on the Canadian dollar at exchange rates over $1.30 in the sort of $1.34, $1.35 range. But as I was discussing earlier with Jorge, we have seen significant strengthening in the Canadian dollar. Today it was around $1.24, but it has even bounced a little off $1.20 in the last quarter. So it's something we watch closely, and we are taking steps to protect our design costs as best as possible with respect to the Canadian dollar. There you can see some valuations. We sanctioned the project assuming a long-term price of $1,350 gold, which had a reasonable return for a project of that nature in that jurisdiction. Obviously, as you look at where spot gold is, there's more value to be had, and as we advance the investment, the go forward valuations are building as we get closer and closer to realizing production from Côté. In terms of balance sheet, we have a strong balance sheet we've maintained for several years, nearly $1 billion in cash and $500 million in an undrawn credit facility. In terms of debt, we have some lease liabilities in the neighborhood of $65 million, mostly for mining equipment at Essakane and Rosebel, although we will start to grow that as we add the mining fleet at Côté. And we have long-term debt of $450 million, mostly in senior notes that we were able to renegotiate last year, push out to a 2028 maturity date and an improved interest rate of 5.75%. And we can see across the bottom On the left-hand side is reserves, and the right-hand side is measured and indicated resources. And you can see a very strong trend over several years in the industry of declining reserves and resources. If I were to throw up the inferred resources, you'll see something similar. Across the top, you can see IAMGOLD's position. So we've been able, over that same time frame, to actually add to our reserves and resources. We have seen some declines in the last year on both. A lot of that related to our sale of the Sadiola asset in Mali this year. We do have opportunities, and we are working hard to find some additional growth in both reserves and resources. And we do have some strong opportunities in the next 18 months to continue to build in those areas. So I think the message here, as you look at the trend for the industry as a whole, it's going to get quite intriguing if you extrapolate that forward. And even looking at 2020 over 2019, as you look into the details, a lot of the reserves and even some of the resources, more on the reserve side, for 2020 were done at higher gold prices than they'd been done at the prior year. So you see decline, even though people have been using higher gold prices in determining their reserves. It will be interesting at the production rates some of these companies have to understand how they'll be able to sustain that into the future. We have continued to invest in our exploration programs. We don't spend wild amounts of money, but we have been successful in converting that effort into additional resources, and then reserves. And we can show the inferred picture is similar as well. We do look at our exploration program strategically. We look for balance across our different jurisdictions, and we look for balance within the status of the project within the development cycle. And we continue to look at ways to fill the bottom. We approach it on a priority basis as to where the money gets spent. But we do understand that you need a balanced exploration program in order to be successful. Now we'll go to the Gosselin slide, please. So, one exciting program for us over the past year has been our work on the Gosselin zone up at Côté. So you can see in that map, that plan view, where the ultimate currently designed Côté open pit is. And within about 1.6 kilometers to the east-northeast, we announced last year the discovery of the Gosselin zone. We've been in the process of drilling that out. You can see some of the intercepts, some of the better intercepts. Overall, our target for Gosselin is 3 to 5 million ounces, close to Côté, at similar grades to Côté. So Côté itself, on 100% basis, has 10.2 million ounces in M&I resources, and another 3.8 million ounces in inferred resources. And if we dare to dream that there is that 3 to 5 million ounces of additional resources at Gosselin, you're now talking about a project that has close to 20 million ounces. So on the earlier slide, when I talked about the long life, there is a strong opportunity to have an even longer life. However, it's even better than that as we look at what Gosselin can do for Côté. Côté has, on a 100% basis, the first 5 years are very strong with an elevated cutoff grade as we mine some higher grade material and generate payback. Gosselin would potentially allow us to extend that period of higher grade material. So it comes right to surface, and with some of the grades you can see there, a very strong opportunity to keep production rates at Côté higher. At Côté, as part of the design process, we have designed in the first expansion. We will be putting some foundations in place. We haven't installed the equipment, but we are really looking at what is possible down the road when we build projects. So we do have a 20% throughput expansion already designed up for Côté. We're going to execute on the current project as it is. But as we look at something like Gosselin, it provides me with a lot of comfort that there is likely a strong justification for us to execute on that expansion project when the time is right, and as well extend the life of the project beyond the 18 years we laid out. I think with that, Jorge, I'll speak a little bit on Boto, and then we'll move on. So Boto is in Senegal in West Africa. It's right in the far southeastern corner of Senegal, right across the river from Boto Gold's Fekela deposit. In fact, you can see the stockpiles at Fekela when you stand at Boto. It's a great project for us. We issued a feasibility study at the end of 2018. We are revisiting that and looking at where the capital is. Certainly over 2 years out, or actually almost 3 years out from when that feasibility study was issued. There has been some changes in the costs. We want to understand where they're at. And we have at the same time advanced the project aggressively. Much as we did with Côté, we like this concept of de-risking. We've done a lot of work on the plant engineering. It's well advanced. We're in the process of building the access road to the site so that we have 12-month-a-year access, and looking at starting some camp construction and some other work in the area. We really obviously want to make sure that we have Côté well on the path to success before we launch on Boto, but we don't want to wait too late. Boto is a great entree into a much bigger play. Boto sitting there in Senegal. You can see on the larger map on the far right how close we are to Fekela. But extending to the south, we have additional deposits, the Diaka deposit, where we have an existing resource declaration, and our more recent Karita discovery. Our challenge, of course, is they're located in 3 separate countries, even though we have reasonable line of sight to a target in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million ounces over a 12-kilometer stretch. The borders do create some challenges for us, and we're working on some concepts that we think would allow us to generate some synergies between projects. Not perfect synergies as a single project, but looking for opportunities to generate synergies that would allow us to do a staged development here that would keep us in the area for a long, long time. And we call that Bambouk. Okay, Jorge, with that, I will turn it back to questions. I know I've been rattling on for a while here.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's a great presentation, Gord. And we did get a few questions, so let's get right into them. So first question, with a strong cash position that IAMGOLD has, and given where the market is at, are you still thinking of sticking to a strategy of organic growth, or has your thinking changed in regarding to pursuing M&A opportunities?
It's a great question. For right now, we are looking at the organic growth opportunities we have with Côté and Boto. As those come into fruition, we will see a strong move towards very, very strong cash flows and where we can understand. Beyond that, with the retirement of the Essakane mine and then eventually the Rosebel mine, we do have to replace production. I touched relatively quickly on the pipeline opportunities, things like Gosselin, things like Bambouk. I didn't talk about Nelligan and Monster Lake in Quebec. We do have pipeline opportunities, and we are working to advance those. But we need to look at those with a measured eye as to whether those are the appropriate business investments to make, or whether we look at something else that we don't currently have in the portfolio to help fill that gap and keep us at that higher production level. as we sit right now, and going back to the slides on our current valuation, our currency is relatively weak. As we see the hope for revaluation as Côté advances and we start to move up, we see ourselves moving relatively quickly into a different situation where M&A may be something that makes some sense for us.
Right.
Right now we're keeping a pretty tight hold on the purse strings to make sure we execute on the projects and we don't get into trouble there. But the further we get along and the better we understand it, the more obvious that opportunity becomes. And as well, we have a number of shareholders, a lot of them online, that will be expecting to see some return on their share.
Yeah.
And as we start to see those nice margins out of the new projects and see those cash flows really start to peak up, we do need to look at what the opportunities for dividends or other types of returns are.
Great. So we have a question from actually Anthony Fierro, who's with PI Financial in Vancouver. Anthony, a nice surprise to see you join the webinar. But Gord, he has a question. Can you please explain the importance of Nelligan as a native project?
So I'm not sure if you're referring to the First Nations aspects of the project or just as a project native to Canada.
Yeah, maybe you could clarify, Anthony, if on the chat. Then maybe while we get the clarification, maybe let me ask you the next question.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question here. To what extent have you increased or decreased your exploration budget across your portfolio projects over the last year? And follow on to that is, are you able to operate in all your projects normally, or do you still face COVID-related challenges?
So from an exploration standpoint, we've been relatively steady in our expenditures over the past 3 or 4 years. Although last year we were impacted by COVID and weren't able to expend the full exploration budget that we had laid out. We chose this year to carry forward some of that shortfall and expand it this year. As we're looking at it, we've sort of been spending around $50 per production ounce. As a sort of a metric, would place us more about in the middle of the pack versus the peer group in terms of the level of expenditure that we have, probably at the lower end. Certainly, as we start to grow production and increase depletion, we'll need to continue to analyze what the appropriate level of exploration is. And we have a lot of different targets across the exploration. I showed you the pipeline there.
Yeah.
As we advance the pipeline projects, you do get into significant expenditures on drilling to improve those, to bring those ore bodies up through the resource stages and to the reserve level in support of feasibility and PFS studies. So some of the money needs to go there, but we always want to try and keep an eye on some of the earlier stage projects and make sure that we see some level of advancement there.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten out of hand with our exploration. We haven't increased it materially at all. But that being said, we're not looking to lower it too much either.
Yeah. No, and traditional IAMGOLD has been one of those companies that really has been successful at doing your own exploration. I mean, which is, I think, something that's everybody appreciates about IAMGOLD.
In internal calculations for resources added, going back for the last 10 years, I think we've spent about $14 per ounce of resource added. So it's a heck of a lot cheaper than it costs to buy them.
Yes. So Anthony has clarified his question, and he meant what's important as a Canadian project, and then he makes a comment here. why wouldn't you do a much larger drill program on this deposit, as it seems to display the potential for a much larger deposit? If you could comment on this.
A great question, Anthony. And this is a deposit that we see some potential on. We are doing some drilling right now. We internally have done some economic studies on the maiden resource we put out. We would like to see some additional tonnage, and we did recognize that the project is open to the west and at depth. The drilling program this year has been focused on it. I mean, one of our challenges at Nelligan and at Côté to a certain extent has been, and I'm sure it's relatively short-lived, but it's been very, very difficult to get your hands on a drill these days.
Yes.
There are a lot of large programs out there, and Nelligan was hampered, or their exploration efforts were a little hampered this year. That being said, we are looking probably next year to do an update on the resource, and really from a strategic level, get a good understanding of how this project needs to come together. And at that point in time, we will be looking to advance it and blitz it so that we can get it into pre-feasibility stage before too long. Obviously, the development timelines and the permitting timelines in Canada are extremely long.
Yes.
So we know that we need to advance it quickly. I will say that we have added some additional properties in the region. Right there, you can see the Anik property immediately adjacent to the Nelligan property. So we like what we've seen, and we have some other ideas in the area. And likewise at Monster Lake, for a couple of years, we've been looking for some additions beyond the McGann 325 zone where the resources at Monster Lake lie. We have in the past year seen some interesting hits on another potential zone there, and would love to twin that deposit. Those high grade ounces are going to be very, very important to the development of Nelligan down the road, and really will provide an interesting business catalyst for Nelligan. Great.
And there's a sort of on the same vein, a question regarding Westwood, and what are the long-term plans for Westwood? Do you to plan to keep wrestling with it, or is it?
That's a great question. That's a great description, actually. Look, Westwood has been a challenge for us. We know it has been a challenge for us. We are in the process of examining what its logical place within the portfolio is. It's been for several years a project that's always seems to be on the come, and it's never really blossomed into the operation that we want. That being said, we do see value there, but we need to understand how that fits within our portfolio, and is that an appropriate IAMGOLD asset. I will say, I think another, and maybe it's a bit of a tangential comment, but certainly with North American investors, given our portfolio in some interesting jurisdictions, we see outsized response to any news from Westwood within our portfolio. So any kind of negative news from Westwood, regardless of the fundamental business impact, has generated historically some outsized negative response, and that in our assessment is related to the fact it's our only North American asset, and there are some investors that place a lot of importance on that. As Côté evolves and really does become the key North American asset, we would expect, or I would expect, that perhaps the attention that gets focused on Westwood will diminish somewhat, and it will be a little easier for us to concentrate on making it work. But we are going to have a look at it, and we're going to have a really strong look at whether it stays with us or not.
Great. So then we have two more questions, and then we'll be at an hour, so we'll conclude. But this one, I mean, let's see what you what do you think about the question. But it's an investor asking, would you consider a merger with companies like, for instance, Torex or Pretium, which have single asset companies but with higher, much higher grade production?
Um, I won't talk around specific companies, but
Yeah.
we have looked at what's out there. When we had the earlier question around M&A, there's obviously different ways of some of those single asset companies, especially ones with near-term cash flow while we're in the midst of the growth profile, provide some interesting opportunities for us. It'll be intriguing to see how those companies are able to be received in the marketplace, unless they can continue to generate additional reserves into the future. And it can be tough at a single asset operation. So, I mean, that's one opportunity. There are larger merger opportunities, or there is picking up sort of late stage development assets. There's a number of different ways to look at it. And what I would say is we have looked at a number of them to understand where they're at. But until we get some share price revaluation, we're somewhat limited as to what's practical and possible.
No, fair enough. So we have a last question, and this is what are the 3 more significant catalysts to look for over the next 12 months?
There's a lot of them. Obviously.
So maybe don't stick up to just 3. Maybe just list whatever you think.
Yeah, look. For me, what I'm looking at really is the existing operations continuing to perform and improve. I want to see the second half improvement out of Rosebel, coming off the back end of COVID, and really seeing Saramacca starting to contribute. We're doing a little work in the plant there that is going to have some nice impacts, but just branching out within Rosebel itself to improve production. That's going to be important. Essakane, we've already completed the mill optimization, so we're just starting to see that. Seeing how the Westwood restart goes and the ramp up, and in the larger sense, what we just discussed, where we end up going with Westwood. But the major milestones that we see are really around Côté. We want to continue to demonstrate advancement. We want to continue to highlight what this project can be. I do believe that Gosselin maiden resource that we're looking to come out with in the second half of the year, and our ability to contextualize it within the overall development of Côté. What does it mean for Côté? Is going to be an important piece. It's kind of interesting to be able to talk about a 3 to 5 million ounce resource that it's been on nobody's books. It's a brand new resource, and people not responding to that kind of good news, or downplaying that kind of good news over the past while. So I think it's part of our job is to really explain to people why that's important. I mean, that's a great find anywhere. There aren't a lot of 3 to 5 million ounce deposits, maiden resources being dropped this year, and we have one of them. So
excellent.
All right.
Well, that was great. We're right on the dot of an hour. So thanks a lot, Gord. That was a fantastic presentation. And thank you, everybody who joined from all parts of Asia and North America. Thank you for taking the time, and well, hopefully we'll have you here again soon.
Hopefully I can do it in person, and hopefully
it's not looking good
get
for
my
that.
haircut before I come. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, thanks to everybody for joining. I hope everybody is happy and healthy and remains that way. And really looking forward for opportunities to meet people in person for sure.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.